Do they really love me? Will fascism return? Why didn't anyone predict Brexit?
What I really wanted to highlight with this show was just not a particular theme, but art's ability to help us confront the complexity of what it is to be human. And to do that, I think what artists do so well is they connect things, images, ideas, materials that we don't normally think of as going together. So they make new connections. And on one level, I think that's the definition of creativity. It's being able to see connections between things that other people don't see. So art to me is about embracing contradictions, juggling different kinds of perspectives. It's also about engaging people and giving them pleasure that they can't anticipate. So that's very different, say, from the kind of pleasures we get from formulaic Hollywood movies or TV shows, which are totally enjoyable, but art offers something different. And I think it engages us maybe more fully. It takes a little more work. But this ability of art to kind of deal with things in a multi-dimensional way is, to me, one of the few places in the culture where that's possible anymore. And what made me decide to focus on that is just in looking over the past couple of years. And I like the idea of the Biennale as a kind of clock where you stop every couple of years and reflect on changes that are happening. It seemed to me that this narrowing of the bandwidths of public exchange and communication, largely thanks probably to the internet, where everybody can tailor their news feeds to reflect whatever they already believe, where facts can be made up and disseminated on millions of different websites, has helped along the polarization of politics, of social interaction, to the point where in many countries, people on different sides of the fence can't even speak to each other because they believe in different facts, so-called facts. And they all can find a news source online that will validate their fact. So to celebrate the fact that art is the place where the opposite of that happens seemed important to me. I think this theme, sometimes themes can be skewed towards one gender or the other. Just, it happens. But I think this is a non-gender specific theme. The title is called May You Live in Interesting Times. And there's a story behind that. I don't even know how I first came across this phrase, but I think I've known it for a long time. It's one of those things that's just kind of floating around the culture. Many, many writers have used it. Hillary Clinton used it in her autobiography. Albert Camus used it. And it turned out that it was always referred to as an ancient Chinese curse. And the idea was that interesting times were times of change, potentially times of revolution, disaster, war, famine. So you really wanted to live in boring, stable, prosperous times. And the phrase was first used by a British member of parliament in 1936 who was warning about the rise of Hitler and the rise of fascism in Europe. And because we're at a moment where Europe is suddenly seeing a surge in extreme right-wing movements, two countries are basically authoritarian governments, others are on the verge of going that way. That little bit of history seemed important, but also the fact that this was a piece of fake news that some of the most famous thinkers and politicians, including Robert Kennedy, used in important speeches, just suggested to me the importance of keeping in mind this idea of having to be skeptical about the news we get and question it. I don't think anyone in this exhibition is making political art, really. I mean, I think some of them are making art politically. They're thinking politically. But to me, political art means art that's trying to drive home one message or is trying to make a point about one issue. And I don't think the work in this show is doing that. I think it's like the art I find really interesting is arts that's raising questions about things. And I think that's what the artists in this show are up to. The most basic organizing principle is that they're actually two separate shows. And I've called these Proposition A, which is in the Arsenale, Proposition B is in the central pavilion. They both feature the same artists. I think they both have quite different characters, but that character isn't easy to identify. It's not that they address different themes or that one focuses on this kind of media. Because of the nature of the Arsenale, which is a huge sprawling building with very tall ceilings, it's crumbling brick former factory. I think the work is probably more rambunctious in some ways. Its scale varies. I mean, so there's a real symphony of scales as you go through the building. It also is an empty shell of a building, so we were then able to break it up architecturally, and we chose to use plywood walls to not make it look like an art fair, or we were trying to dress up this factory building. And my interest was also in dissecting it, because the Arsenale is like this huge digestive system. You kind of get swallowed up at the beginning and you get spat out at the end. And usually you're completely exhausted and your will to live has been sapped by the fact that you've just seen 500 artworks. So I wanted to break up that long linear journey by horizontally dividing the space in different ways and creating smaller pockets where groups of artists might appear. But the biggest gambit was this idea that by having artists present different aspects of their work in both venues, that would just make people confront the fact that artists don't tell single stories. They don't always do things the same way. Their work is also, their practice is multidimensional as well as their work. And I think it takes away the focus from the individual work a little bit and puts it more on what is an artist's practice about. Nicole Eisenman is a painter of such consummate skill. I mean, I think she's really a truly major American artist, but a lot of her paintings have a satirical edge, and they verge sort of between being almost realistic. I mean, she often includes, signs of our time in terms of people wearing hoodies, looking at their Macs, but they also have that comical caricature edge of regional painting, say, from the 1930s even. And in the Arsenale, she has these giant heads of the king, the general, the economics professor, which are kind of grotesque versions of statues you might find in a government building. Ed Atkins, who is a great opera lover and has 700 incredible opera costumes in this amazing piece called Old Food. I mean, that's one of the most complex video works I've seen in a long time, and I'm really thrilled that we have it here. I'm still trying to understand it. I mean, I think there's actually much less video than there has been in most biennales, and much more painting and photography and sculpture, especially. But I also think these oppositions are questioned by a lot of the work in the show. Strangely enough, a couple of the painters are really addressing digital culture as much as, say, a video artist like John Raffman, who's famous for looking at online culture and exploring video game imagery. But Avery Singer is an artist who doesn't use a paintbrush, but makes paintings using often digital software to construct her images. The source of her imagery often comes from things online. Is she a digital artist? I think she is. I mean, but I think that distinction kind of becomes meaningless. I mean, George Condo has made an incredible painting called Facebook that's really kind of looking at this culture we live in, where you have to be very careful believing something you see on Facebook. I don't think there's any work that's really about identity in a kind of old sense. The work that probably stands out about racial identity for me is Arthur Jafa's The White Album.
I feel the need to say something about it.
Let's take our white America back. I love America. I love white America.
Which is really the take of Arthur, who's African American, looking at, it's his take on white American culture. And I mean, I think there are works that definitely confront us quite specifically with an identity, like Zanele Muhali often foregrounds the fact that she's a black, lesbian, South African woman, and she sees herself as an activist as much as an artist. But her works aren't about identity. I mean, they're not about her identity as a black woman. They're much more challenging than that. They have many different levels, but I think they're also challenging the way we look at them. That goes beyond something about identity. I think one conversation that appears in different places in the exhibition is between works that might be normally seen as abstract, works that might look more representational. Sometimes this might involve sculpture. It might involve painting and photography that both are relying on repetitive patterns. It could involve works that are addressing social issues, but one's abstract, one's representational. And I think what's interesting is, say, there's a room where Julie Mehretu's paintings are next to Henry Taylor and George Condo, and Julie's are the most abstract, George is somewhere in between, Henry's the most representational, and yet you can see some of the same kind of marks that Julie's using in her paintings in Henry's. And you start to see that actually this is a spectrum. These categories aren't airtight. Julie's paintings, interestingly enough, were worked up from news photographs of protests and California fires, and most of the imagery has vanished, so you might occasionally see the outline of a human limb. But the kind of restless, frenetic energy of her mark making is her response to those images. So it's a translation, not a representation. But they are responding to the world. Halil Altander, who has an incredible work over here, which is called Neverland, and it looks like a Hollywood movie facade, and it's the pavilion for refugees. That's his contribution on this side. In the other pavilion, he's done a series of works around a Syrian cosmonaut, who's one of only 2 Arab cosmonauts or astronauts. Became a great hero in Syria and ended up opposing the Assad regime. He was in the Air Force and he refused to drop bombs on his own people. He had to flee for his life to move to Turkey, and with the artist, ironically started a movement to resettle Syrian refugees on Mars, as a comment really in the fact that there was no one in Europe seemed willing to take these refugees in. Next door to that is an amazing diorama of Mars by Dominique Gonzalez-Foster and Joy Biddle, which is very much like something you might see in some alternative science museum, with a beautiful landscape drawing of Mars that really looks like something Leonardo might have drawn, and a couple of science fiction books buried in the landscape. And interestingly, the landscape that they've created is based on photographs of the driest places on Earth. So it's not actually based on what images of Mars look like, but it's one of these places is a desert in Chile where it hasn't rained in 50 years. So when I look at their diorama, I think of Mars, but I also think of a possible future on Earth. I think they all challenge our views in different ways. I think, this happens in really different ways, but it's usually metaphorical. I mean, there's not work that's really straightforwardly political. There's a work which might seem completely unpolitical to most viewers, which is a holographic kind of demonic angel, which appears in the Rotunda room, which is this octagonal room with about a 16-meter high ceiling that's got a painted fresco, classical thing with angels in the sky. And Cyprien Gaillard has taken an image from a Max Ernst painting called the L'Ange du Foyer, the angel in the foyer, which Ernst painted in 1936 as a premonition of the rise of fascism. Again, the same year that the title comes from. appears in print for the first time. And I think, Cyprian's choice of using this particular image from that particular painting and bringing it back now in this context where it's like some angel that's fallen from above is very much looking at the rise of populist politics now. But it's not spelling it out. It's done with a very cheap piece of technology that costs about $100. To me, the show should be like raw materials from which visitors put together their own theories about what this work is talking about. And I think it's great to have an engaged and stimulating experience in the gallery, but ultimately what matters in your life is what happens when you leave the gallery. So I hope people find not just different things to talk about, but different ways of talking about them, different ways that they become sensitized to seeing connections they might not normally see in the world between different kinds of things.
In the future, fish will have no heads, and there is water all over.